You learn to watch. That's what happens when you grow up being the sensible one. You learn to observe, to stay quiet, to let others shine while you fade into the background. My older sister, Vanessa, was always the bright, shining star of the Hartley family. I was just Emma. Reliable, boring Emma, who worked some government job nobody really understood. I'm 28 now, and for the past 6 years, I've watched my family treat me like I'm somehow less than. Less successful, less interesting, less worthy of their attention. Vanessa, on the other hand, could do no wrong in their eyes. It started when I graduated from university. While Vanessa was posting Instagram photos from Paris and Dubai, I was grinding through one of the most rigorous training programs in the country. The acceptance rate was less than 3%. I studied financial crimes, forensic accounting, and federal law for 18 months straight. When I finally got my badge as a financial crimes investigator for the Canadian Revenue Agency's Criminal Investigations Division, I decided to keep it quiet. My family had already made up their minds about who I was. Just a government auditor, my mum would say with a dismissive wave. Pushing papers for the CRA. Such a waste of your degree, Emma. Vanessa, meanwhile, was living what appeared to be a charmed life. At 32, she drove a Range Rover, lived in a condo in Yorkville with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Toronto, and wore clothes that cost more than my monthly salary. She called herself a luxury lifestyle consultant, though I'd never quite understood what that meant. Her Instagram showed designer handbags, first-class flights, and champagne brunches. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in North York, drove a used Honda Civic, and wore clothes from Winners. The contrast wasn't lost on anyone, especially not at family gatherings. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago, on a cold November evening. It was Mum's 60th birthday, and she'd insisted on a big family dinner at her house in Mississauga. The whole family was there. Mum, Dad, Vanessa and her fiancé Kyle, my Aunt Patricia, Uncle David, and my cousins. I arrived straight from work, still in my conservative blazer and slacks. Vanessa arrived 20 minutes late, making an entrance in a cream-colored coat that probably cost $3,000. Sorry, she sang out, kissing Mum's cheek. We were at the Porsche dealership. Kyle's getting me an early wedding gift. She flashed her phone around, showing photos of a sleek black Cayenne. Oh, darling, how wonderful, Mum gushed. Kyle, you're too generous. Kyle smirked, wrapping his arm around Vanessa's waist. He ran some kind of cryptocurrency consulting business that I'd always found suspicious, but everyone else seemed impressed by his talk of blockchain innovations and decentralized finance. I sat down quietly at the table, pouring myself a glass of water. Emma, sweetie, how's work? Aunt Patricia asked politely. She was one of the few family members who actually tried to include me in conversations. It's good, I said simply. Busy, but good. Still auditing? Uncle David asked. When are you going to get a real job with a real company? Government work is so limiting. I felt my jaw tighten, but I just smiled. I'm happy where I am. She's being modest, Dad chimed in, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly proud. Emma's very dependable. Not everyone can be a go-getter like Vanessa. Vanessa beamed. Speaking of which, Kyle and I have an announcement. Everyone turned to her, all attention immediately shifting. This was how it always went. We've set a wedding date. June 14th, next year. And we're doing it big. We've booked the Fairmont Royal York. 300 guests, full reception, the works. Mum actually shrieked with excitement. The table erupted in congratulations. I clapped politely along with everyone else. That sounds expensive, I said carefully. The Royal York must be, what, 100,000 for something that size? Try 200, Vanessa said smugly. But we can afford it. I've been saving, and Kyle's business is booming. Plus, Kyle added, Vanessa's got excellent credit. We've already been approved for a line of credit to cover some of the costs. 120,000, actually. My stomach dropped. Something about the way he said it, the way they glanced at each other, set off alarm bells in my head. but I said nothing. Dinner continued, and as always, I faded into the background while Vanessa held court. She talked about the wedding planner she'd hired, the dress designer, the honeymoon in the Maldives they were planning. Everyone hung on her every word. Then, halfway through dessert, Vanessa looked directly at me with a strange little smile. "Emma, I actually have you to thank for some of this," she said. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" "Well," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "you weren't using your credit, so I figured, why let it go to waste?" The table went quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat. "I don't understand," I said slowly. Vanessa laughed, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "The line of credit? I used your name and SIN to apply for it. Your credit score is perfect. Mine's a bit dodgy from a few missed payments last year. But you're just sitting on all that beautiful credit, not doing anything with it." "So I borrowed it." I stared at her. You? You took out $120,000 in my name?" "Well, technically yes, but I'm making the payments, so what's the problem? It's not like you were going to use it. You don't even go on vacation, Emma." Aunt Patricia gasped softly. My cousin Sarah looked uncomfortable, but my mother, my own mother, just frowned at me like I was being unreasonable. "Emma, don't make a scene," Mum said sharply. "It's my birthday." "She committed identity theft," I said quietly, my voice shaking. "That's a federal crime." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. It's not theft when it's family. Don't be so dramatic. Besides, what are you going to do about it? Sue me?" She laughed. "You work for the government, Emma. You probably make, what, $50,000 a year? You can't even afford a lawyer." Kyle snorted. "Yeah, and even if you could, you really want to drag your own sister through court? Over money she's paying back anyway?" "It's the principle," I said, my hands trembling. "You can't just—" "Emma." Dad's voice was stern. "Your sister is getting married. This is a happy time. Can't you just be supportive for once, instead of always being so rigid?" I looked around the table. Uncle David looked away. Aunt Patricia gave me a sympathetic look, but said nothing. My cousins stared at their plates. My parents both looked at me with disappointment, like I was the one causing problems. Only Vanessa looked triumphant, that smug little smile still playing on her lips. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin on the table. "Excuse me," I said. "I need to make a phone call." I walked outside into the cold November night, my breath forming clouds in the air. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts and pressed a number I'd never thought I'd have to use in a personal capacity. "Lyons," came the gruff voice of my supervisor, Director James Lyons. "Sir, it's Emma Hartley. I'm sorry to call you on a Saturday evening, but I need to report a crime. Against me personally." There was a pause. "Go ahead." "My sister just confessed, in front of witnesses, to identity theft and fraud. She's taken out a $120,000 line of credit using my name and social insurance number without my permission or knowledge." "Christ, Hartley. I'm sorry. Do you want to proceed with this?" I thought about my family inside, celebrating. I thought about all the years of being dismissed, overlooked, told I wasn't good enough. I thought about Vanessa's smug face. "Yes, sir. I want to proceed. Full investigation." "Understood. Given your relationship to the suspect, you'll need to recuse yourself from the investigation. I'll assign it to Jenkins and Martinez. They're good. This'll be handled properly." "Thank you, sir." "Hartley? For what it's worth, you're doing the right thing. Family or not, fraud is fraud." I hung up and stood there for a moment, letting the cold air calm my racing heart. Then I walked back inside. The party had resumed. Vanessa was showing Mum something on her phone, probably more wedding inspiration. I sat back down at my seat and quietly finished my water. "Everything all right?" Aunt Patricia asked softly. "Yes," I said. "Everything's fine now." The dinner wrapped up around 10 o'clock. Vanessa and Kyle left first, still talking excitedly about catering options. I helped Mum clean up in the kitchen, enduring her passive-aggressive comments about how I should try to be more like my sister, more ambitious, more fun. I drove home that night feeling strangely calm. I'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. But for the first time in years, I'd stood up for myself. The next 2 weeks were quiet. I went to work, attended meetings, reviewed case files, all while knowing that my colleagues were building a case against my own sister. Director Lyons checked in with me twice to make sure I was okay. I assured him I was. I didn't tell my family what I'd done. Let them find out the hard way. On a gray Tuesday afternoon, I got a text from Jenkins. Package delivered. Suspect in custody. My phone rang 5 minutes later. It was Mum, and she was hysterical. "Emma, what have you done? The police just arrested Vanessa. At her workplace. They're saying she stole your identity. This is insane. You need to fix this right now." I took a deep breath. "I can't fix it, Mum. She committed a crime. A federal crime. She's your sister. And she stole $120,000 using my name. That's identity theft, fraud, and forgery under the criminal code. She confessed to it in front of the entire family." "You vindictive little bitch," Mum hissed. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay your family? Goodbye, Mum." I hung up. My phone exploded with messages. Angry texts from Dad, from Kyle, from Vanessa's friends. A few from extended family members who'd heard the news. Most were condemning me. A few, like Aunt Patricia and my cousin Sarah, were quietly supportive. One text stood out. It was from Vanessa herself, from someone else's phone. "You're going to regret this. I'll make sure you never work again. Kyle has connections." I screenshot it and forwarded it to Jenkins. Witness intimidation would be added to her charges. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. I wasn't required to attend, but I went anyway, sitting in the public gallery. I wanted to see this through. Vanessa showed up in a designer suit, flanked by an expensive lawyer her fiancé had hired. She looked confident, like she thought this would all blow over. Her lawyer tried to argue that it was a family misunderstanding, that Vanessa had intended to pay everything back, that there was no criminal intent. But the Crown prosecutor, a sharp woman named Rachel Nguyen, was having none of it. "Your Honor," Nguyen said crisply. "The defendant knowingly and willfully used her sister's personal information to obtain a line of credit of $120,000. She did this without permission, without notification, and without any documentation suggesting Miss Emma Hartley's consent. This is textbook identity theft under Section 402.2 of the Criminal Code. Additionally, the defendant has been accessing the funds for personal expenses. We have evidence of withdrawals totaling $78,000 in just 3 months, spent on luxury goods, travel, and wedding expenses." Vanessa's lawyer tried to interject, but the judge raised a hand. "Has the defendant made any payments toward this debt?" the judge asked. The prosecutor shook her head. "No, Your Honor, not a single payment. The debt has been accruing interest on Miss Hartley's credit profile, damaging her financial standing." The judge looked at Vanessa with obvious disgust. "Miss Hartley, Vanessa Hartley, you are remanded into custody pending trial. Bail is set at $50,000. Vanessa's face went white. Kyle stood up in the gallery, shouting about how this was ridiculous, how they were engaged to be married. Security removed him from the courtroom. I sat there, watching my sister be led away in handcuffs, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, just a quiet sense that justice was finally being served. Vanessa made bail 2 days later. Kyle emptied what was left of his business account to pay it. But the damage was done. Her employer fired her for the scandal. Her Instagram, once full of glamorous photos, went dark. Friends distanced themselves. My family, predictably, blamed me. Dad sent me a long email about how I'd destroyed Vanessa's life over a mistake. Mum stopped speaking to me entirely. Extended family members whispered about me at gatherings I was no longer invited to. But I also got messages of support. Aunt Patricia called to tell me she was proud of me. My cousin Sarah sent flowers with a note. "You did the right thing." Even a few of Vanessa's former friends reached out privately to say they'd suspected she was living beyond her means for years. The trial was set for 4 months later. In the meantime, the investigation expanded. Jenkins and Martinez discovered that Vanessa hadn't just stolen my identity, she'd been running a small-scale fraud operation for years. She'd convinced several of her wealthy clients to invest in fake luxury consulting opportunities, pocketing deposits and never delivering services. The total fraud amount exceeded $400,000. Kyle, it turned out, was involved too. His cryptocurrency business was a pyramid scheme. They'd been using the money from both operations to fund their lavish lifestyle, always one step ahead of creditors and angry clients. When the full scope of the investigation went public, my family finally went quiet. Even Mum couldn't defend Vanessa anymore. The trial lasted a week. I testified on the second day, walking through what Vanessa had said at the birthday dinner, how she'd confessed so casually, so arrogantly. The defense tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone with a grudge against her more successful sister. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, forged documents with my signature, testimony from the financial institution, messages between Vanessa and Kyle discussing how Emma will never know and how they could milk her credit for at least a year. On the final day, the judge delivered the verdict. Vanessa Marie Hartley, the judge began, her voice stern. You have been found guilty on all counts: identity theft, fraud over $5,000, forgery, and criminal breach of trust. Your actions were not those of someone who made a simple mistake. They were calculated, deliberate, and showed a profound lack of respect not only for the law but for your own family member. Vanessa stood there, her expensive lawyer beside her, tears streaming down her face. Kyle sat in the gallery, his face pale. You believed that being family gave you the right to exploit your sister's trust and financial standing. You were wrong. You believed that your victim would be too intimidated, too conflict-averse, or too powerless to hold you accountable. You were wrong about that too. The judge paused, looking down at her notes. Taking into account the severity of the crimes, the amount of money involved, the breach of familial trust, and your complete lack of remorse throughout these proceedings, I sentence you to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of probation. You are also ordered to pay full restitution of $120,000 to Miss Emma Hartley, plus damages for credit repair and legal fees, totaling $147,000. Vanessa collapsed. Her lawyer caught her. Kyle shouted something from the gallery and was removed by security again. I sat in the gallery, watching my sister be led away, and finally felt the weight lift from my shoulders. 3 months later, I sat in Director Lyons' office. He'd called me in for what he said was a performance review. Hartley, he said, leaning back in his chair, you've been with CRA Criminal Investigations for 6 years. Your case closure rate is 92%. Your forensic accounting work is some of the best I've seen, and you handled your personal situation with more professionalism than most people could manage. I nodded, unsure where this was going. How would you feel about a promotion? Senior investigator, complex financial crimes unit, 15% salary increase, and you'd be leading a team. I blinked. Sir, Yes, absolutely. Thank you, he smiled. You earned it, Hartley. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. That evening, I drove to Aunt Patricia's house. She'd invited me for dinner, one of the few family members who still spoke to me. Over homemade lasagna, she asked how I was really doing. Honestly, I said, I'm good, better than I've been in years. Your mom still won't talk to you? No. Dad sent me a brief email last week. Just said he understood why I did what I did, even if he doesn't agree with it. That's something, I guess. Aunt Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You know what you did took real courage, right? Most people would have just let it go to keep the peace. Keeping the peace would have meant letting her destroy my credit, my financial future, and probably do the same thing to someone else down the line, I said. She needed to face consequences. She did. And you gave them to her. As I drove home that night, I thought about everything that had happened. My family might never forgive me. Vanessa certainly wouldn't, but I'd learned something valuable through all of this. Being underestimated your whole life teaches you patience. It teaches you to observe, to gather evidence, to wait for the right moment. My family saw me as boring, powerless, irrelevant. They were wrong. I'd spent 6 years investigating financial criminals, people who thought they were smarter than the system, who thought they'd never get caught. Vanessa was just another name on that list. The fact that she was my sister didn't make her any less guilty. And here's what I learned, what I wish someone had told me years ago. Family isn't supposed to be a shield for criminal behavior. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse, theft, or exploitation. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their actions, even when it's hard, even when everyone else tells you you're wrong. If someone steals your identity, even if they're family, report it immediately. Don't wait. Don't give them a chance to pay it back. Don't let guilt or family pressure stop you. Identity theft can destroy your credit for years, affect your ability to get loans, jobs, or housing. The average victim spends over 200 hours and thousands of dollars trying to repair the damage. And if you're ever in a position where family expects you to sacrifice your well-being, your finances, or your integrity for their benefit, you don't owe them that. You owe yourself protection, respect, and the courage to stand up for what's right. My sister made her choices. She chose to steal from me. She chose to lie. She chose to believe she was entitled to my financial stability because I was just boring Emma who wouldn't fight back. She was wrong, and now she's paying the price. I'm 28 years old, a senior investigator for the Canadian Revenue Agency, and I finally understand something important. Being underestimated isn't a weakness, it's camouflage. And when the time comes to reveal who you really are, the impact is so much more powerful. Vanessa learned that the hard way. I just wish it hadn't taken 5 years in prison for the lesson to sink in. But that's not my responsibility anymore. I did my job. I protected myself. And I made sure that the next person she tried to scam wouldn't have to go through what I did. That's what justice looks like. Even when it's complicated. Even when it's family. Especially when it's family.